In this video, I will be going over my preferred way of painting Harlequin diamonds. This pattern is done in 3 parts. For the first part, we will create a grid of white lines. Then we will fill in the grid with black X's, and finally we will fill in the diamonds. For the first part, I will do vertical lines down the leg and horizontal rings around it. This will give us a grid of squares. The number of lines we add to the leg will decide the shape and size of the diamonds. The most important part when drawing these lines is to have them evenly spaced out. For the vertical lines on the leg, I often do 4 lines, just as my preference for the size of the grid. I normally paint the front and back lines first, so I can more evenly space out the lines around the model. When painting the lines, I'm not worried about how wide the lines are or how nice they look, because they will be completely painted over in the end. When painting the sides of the leg, make sure to follow the shape of the leg. This is particularly important when the leg is bent. For paint, I'm using a watered down Althuan gray, but any light paint that is easy to cover up works fine. At this point, we have our 4 vertical white lines painted evenly spaced out around the model, and I'm going to move on to the horizontal rings. For these rings, I normally like to start at an interesting point. Often that will be the knee, because it will either be bent or smaller than the rest of the leg. For this first ring, I'm choosing the cut on the pant to do the first ring, and I'll evenly space out the rings from there. For the second ring, I'm going to paint it as far from the first ring as the vertical lines are spread out. This will give a square pattern, as I want the diamonds to be square on this model. If you want diamonds that aren't square but are taller than wide, you can either add more vertical lines to make them thinner, or space out the horizontal rings to make them taller. Also, if you find the diamonds in the last stage are too small to easily fill in, reduce the number of lines in this stage until the diamonds are large enough for your comfort. The back of this ring is a wider line, and it doesn't quite connect to the start of the ring. I'm not going to worry about that, as we just need the approximate intersections for the lines for the next part. If you're painting a leg that is thinner at the knee than the thigh, you may need to space out the rings more as the leg widens. This means the diamonds will be smaller at the knee than at the thigh, but it'll keep the diamonds more consistent in shape. The easiest way is to watch how far the lines spread out as they move along the leg when you're painting the rings. So I made a mistake here with too much water on my brush. I'm going to just move on with the pattern to show that it doesn't matter if you make larger mistakes like this. The pattern will still work. We just need to clean up enough of the ring to know about where it connects with the vertical line. I'm going to add one last ring near the top of the leg, and the first part of the pattern will be complete. Because these guidelines are going to be painted over in the last step, we want to make sure the paint is thinned out enough that we don't leave any ridge or bumps. I've shown that you can water your paint down too much, but I would rather it be wet than clump up. Before moving to the second part, I'm going to quickly touch up the large mistake I made so that I can more clearly see where the ring and the vertical line intersects. The model is still a bit too wet, but this will work for the purpose of the pattern. Once our white grid is complete, we move on to adding an X in each square. Again, I'm not too worried at this stage how wide my lines are, as I will fix them in the third part. When doing the black lines, you can either stick to doing one X in each square, or do one smooth line through a bunch of squares, and then go back to do the other squares in the other direction later. If your white lines in the first step are a bit thicker, or the rings don't quite connect, you can make some adjustments at this part to where the black lines intersect with the white grid. This can help fix mistakes in the first part if the pattern isn't quite square. When you come to the upper portion of the model, the grid isn't quite a square, so we just approximate where the square would end. At this spot, I will just do the lower half of the X. You'll notice I'm not worried about the larger blotch I just made, as that can be corrected in the next part. For this phase, I'm using Abaddon Black. Like the first phase, I want my paint thinned out. These lines will be just as much guidelines for the diamonds as they will be part of the finished pattern. At this point, we can start to see where some of the diamonds are taking shape with the black lines. I've made another slight mistake here, as my line has a bit of a bend in it. To fix this, I'm just going to leave it a bit thicker and fix it in the next part. This part of the pattern will end when we have a black X in each of the white squares. At this point, we have the black lines for our diamond pattern. In the third part, we will fill the diamonds in and let us thin and correct these lines. On the back, you can see that I wasn't that careful with some of the lines and made a bit of a mess, more than the rest of the model currently looks. In the third part, I will show how we can correct those mistakes. For the third part of the pattern, we just fill in our diamonds made by the black lines. Just pick a color and a diamond to start at. For this part, I'm using Celestra Gray as it is more opaque to cover up the guidelines. While filling in the diamonds, we can go over some of our thicker black lines to thin them out as well. This is definitely the most time-consuming part of the pattern and requires some patience. If you find this part is slower than you want, change the pattern at the start to have fewer white lines. If the intersection of your black lines were too thick, you may have to be careful where the diamond points end to keep them square and in line. If you find your diamonds aren't square enough, you can go over the black line completely. Then later, you can add in a new black line to correct the pattern. On this top white diamond, you can see that the right point is higher than the left point. This is a case where we'll go over the diamond again to adjust the right point lower and correct the black lines after. The second white diamond, I went a bit too far over the black line, so I'll come back in at the end and touch up the line as needed. Switching to the back of the leg, you can see I'll have to correct the thick lines and oddly shaped diamonds. I'll continue to fill in the diamonds, but I'll leave this back area until the end to show how to correct it. At this point, most of the diamonds are filled in. You can see that with the diamonds filled in, all of the white lines from the first part are gone. This includes a large mistake I made with the wet paint. On this diamond, you can see that I've thinned out the black lines a bit more than I have in other areas. I did that to correct the shape of the diamond, as it wasn't quite square. When I'm done filling in the rest of the diamonds, I will come back to this spot and touch up the black line just to make it stand out more. As I rotate the model, you can see the pattern is consistent the whole way around. The one part I didn't fill in yet is the mistake I made on the back of the leg. I wanted to show how to fix a mistake like this that was made in the second step. To fix this, I first painted the diamond around it to give some definition to the area I need to correct. This will help guide where the blue diamond should be painted. So now you can see that the mistake for this first diamond is completely gone. I'm not totally happy with how this second blue diamond lines up with the white ones around it. So to fix it, I'm just going to go over some of the black lines now and add in the black lines back in later. I'm also going to need to correct this white diamond. So I'm going to have to cover up that black line almost completely with the white and then come and correct it more later. Finally, I have to add just a bit of blue paint to the next diamond over to get rid of that little white guideline left over from the very first part. At this point, the first layer of our diamond pattern is complete. I'll come back after doing a second layer of brighter colors and some black line corrections. This is how the pattern looks at the end. You can see that I've gone over the diamonds with a brighter color. That's just my preference. You can also do just an edge highlight or a fade. I've also touched up the lines. A few of them were a bit thicker than I wanted when I touched them up, so I just went over the edges of the thick lines again to thin them out and make them look smooth. On the back, we can see how the largest mistake is also now fixed and looks quite clean. And that's it. Just remember that if your lines end up a bit thick or don't quite connect, keep at it and you can always fix it as you can go along. Thanks for watching my first video on how to paint diamonds. If you want more details on how to do the pattern over a bend, or the side of a jacket and the arm, I have my original written guide in the description below. I look forward to hearing if the pattern was helpful, or if you have questions in the comments.